The shuttle moved through the darkness of space like a small metal fish swimming through an endless ocean. Inside, Marcus Webb sat alone in the passenger cabin. He looked out the window at the massive station growing larger with each passing second. Concordia Prime, the heart of galactic civilization. The place where the 12 most powerful species in the known universe gathered to make decisions that affected trillions of lives. Marcus was 53 years old. His hair had gone gray at the temples. His face had the kind of lines that came from years of smiling and years of worry in equal measure. He wore a simple dark suit with a small earth pin on his collar. Nothing fancy, nothing impressive. He looked like exactly what his official record said he was. A career diplomat from the United Earth government, sent to represent humanity at its first formal summit with the Galactic Council. The shuttle pilot, a young woman named Chen, spoke through the intercom. "Ambassador Webb, we're beginning our approach. Station Control has given us clearance to dock at Port 17. Thank you, Lieutenant," Marcus said. His voice was calm and quiet, the kind of voice that made people lean in to listen rather than back away. He had been preparing for this moment for 3 years. Meetings, briefings, language lessons, cultural training. He had memorized the names and histories of all 12 council species. He knew their customs, their beliefs, their fears and hopes. He knew which ones might support humanity's petition for membership and which ones would oppose it. The truth was, most of them would oppose it. Humanity had only been traveling between stars for 200 years. In galactic terms, that was nothing. The youngest species on the council, the Meridian Collective, had been spacefaring for 11,000 years. The oldest, the Virathi Dominion, claimed a history stretching back over 2 million years. To them, humans were babies. Insects, creatures that had barely learned to walk and were now demanding a seat at the table of gods. Marcus understood their perspective. He did not agree with it, but he understood it. The station filled the window now. Concordia Prime was enormous. It was shaped like a wheel with 12 spokes, each spoke representing one of the council species. At the center was the Great Chamber, where the council held its meetings. The whole structure was 50 kilometers across. Over 8 million beings lived and worked there. It was a city floating in the void, a monument to cooperation between species that had once tried to destroy each other. The shuttle entered one of the many docking ports. There was a gentle bump as the magnetic clamps engaged. Then silence. Marcus stood up and straightened his suit. He picked up his briefcase, which contained nothing but documents and a photograph of his daughter. He walked to the airlock and waited. The door opened with a soft hiss. On the other side stood a delegation of 5 beings. They were Caliph, a species of tall, thin creatures with blue skin and 4 arms. The Caliph served as the administrative staff of the station. They were neutral in all political matters, which made them perfect for handling arrivals and departures. "Ambassador Webb," said the lead Caliph. Her voice was melodic, almost like singing. "Welcome to Concordia Prime. I am Administrator Veleth. I will escort you to your quarters." "Thank you, Administrator," Marcus said. He stepped through the airlock and onto the station. The air smelled different here, recycled, but with hints of strange plants and alien chemicals. "I appreciate the Council making time for Earth's petition." Veleth's large black eyes blinked slowly. "The Council makes time for all petitions, Ambassador. Whether they grant them is another matter." Marcus smiled. "I understand. We're new to this. We have much to learn." They walked through long corridors filled with beings of every shape and size. Marcus saw creatures that looked like walking trees, others that seemed made of living metal, and some that existed as clouds of glowing particles held together by force fields. Each one glanced at him as he passed, some with curiosity, most with dismissal, a few with open hostility. Humanity had not made many friends in its short time among the stars. There had been misunderstandings, conflicts, 2 small wars that humanity had won through luck and determination, rather than superior technology. The galaxy had noticed. The galaxy was not pleased. "Your quarters are in the neutral section," Veleth explained as they walked. "You will have access to the common areas and the petition hall. The Great Chamber itself is restricted until your formal presentation tomorrow." "That's fine," Marcus said. "I could use the time to review my notes." Veleth made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You humans are always reviewing notes. Always preparing. The Scareth delegation finds it amusing." They say you prepare for everything because you are afraid of everything. Marcus kept walking. His expression did not change. Fear is not always a weakness, Administrator. Sometimes it keeps you alive long enough to learn. They reached his quarters. The room was small but comfortable. A bed designed for human proportions. A desk, a window looking out at the stars. Everything he needed and nothing more. The council session begins at the 10th hour tomorrow. Velith said. A guide will come to escort you. Do you have any questions? Just one, Marcus said. Who will be speaking against Earth's petition? Velith's forearms moved in a gesture that Marcus had learned meant uncertainty. Several delegations have expressed reservations. The Virathi High Chancellor has said publicly that humanity is not ready. The Scarith believe you are too aggressive. The Mordith Collective. She paused. The Mordith have made formal objections. They claim that 3 of your colony worlds are in space they consider their territory. Marcus nodded slowly. He had expected this. The Mordith were an insectoid species with a hive mind structure. They were always hungry for expansion. They had fought wars with 6 other council species over territorial disputes. Now they had set their eyes on humanity's Kepler colonies. Thank you, Administrator, Marcus said. I'll be ready. Velith left him alone. Marcus set his briefcase on the desk and opened it. He took out the photograph of his daughter, Sarah. She was 26 now. A doctor on Mars colony. She had her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn streak. He placed the photo on the desk where he could see it. Then he sat down and closed his eyes. The room was quiet. The station hummed softly around him, the sound of 1,000,000 machines keeping 8 million beings alive in the cold of space. Marcus listened to that sound. He let it fill him. He let himself feel the weight of where he was and what he was about to do. He had been chosen for this mission very carefully. The United Earth government had considered hundreds of candidates, military heroes, famous scientists, charismatic politicians. In the end, they had chosen a quiet man with gray hair and a calm voice, a man who seemed entirely ordinary. That was the point. Marcus opened his eyes. For just a moment, they were not the brown eyes of a 53-year-old diplomat. They were something else, something deeper, something that had watched stars being born and had waited patiently while life crawled out of oceans and learned to think. Then the moment passed, and he was just Marcus Webb again. He began reviewing his notes. The next morning came quickly. Marcus had not slept. He did not need to, though he had lain in the bed for several hours to keep up appearances. When the guide came to escort him to the great chamber, he was dressed and ready. The guide was a small robotic unit that floated at shoulder height. It led him through corridors that grew progressively grander. The walls changed from plain metal to polished stone. The lights grew brighter. The ceiling rose higher. Finally, they reached the entrance to the great chamber. It was a circular room over 1 kilometer across. The ceiling was a dome of transparent material showing the stars above. Around the edges were 12 elevated platforms, each one designed for a different species. In the center was a single podium, where petitioners would stand to make their case. The platforms were already occupied. Marcus looked at each delegation in turn. The Virathi were there, their crystalline bodies catching the light and splitting it into rainbows. Their High Chancellor, a being named Keth Voran, stood at the front of their platform. He was ancient even by Virathi standards, his crystal structure clouded with age but still imposing. The Scarith were there too. They were reptilian, with scales the color of dried blood and mouths full of teeth designed for tearing flesh. They had evolved as apex predators on their homeworld. They still thought like predators. Their lead delegate, a massive warrior named Thesk, watched Marcus with yellow eyes that never blinked. The Mordith Collective occupied another platform. They were insectoid, with hard shells and too many limbs. Their ambassador was not a single being but a cluster of 5 individuals who shared one mind. They moved in perfect synchronization, their compound eyes reflecting everything. The other 9 delegations filled their platforms. The tree-like Verdani, the energy beings called the Lumineth, the mechanical Forgeborn, each one powerful, each one ancient, each one looking down at the single human walking to the central podium. Marcus reached the podium and stood before the assembled council. He felt their attention on him like physical weight. Some of them were curious. Most were skeptical. A few were actively hostile. High Chancellor Keth Voran spoke first. His voice resonated through the chamber, amplified by crystals embedded in the walls. The Galactic Council recognizes the representative of the species called humanity. You may state your petition. Marcus took a breath. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but clear. It reached every corner of the vast chamber without apparent effort. Thank you, High Chancellor, distinguished members of the Council. My name is Marcus Webb. I am here on behalf of Earth and its colonies to formally petition for membership in the Galactic Council. A ripple of movement went through the platforms. Sounds that might have been laughter or scorn. Humanity is young, Marcus continued. We know this. 2 centuries ago, we took our first steps beyond our home world. We have made mistakes. We have fought when we should have talked. We have feared when we should have welcomed. We are still learning. He paused, letting his eyes move across the assembled delegations. But we believe that youth is not a disqualification. We believe that our perspective, fresh and unbound by ancient conflicts, might have value. We believe that we have something to offer this council, even if we cannot yet see what that something is. Desk of the Scarith made a harsh sound. Pretty words from a prey species. Your kind has been in space for 2 centuries and already you have fought 2 wars. You are violent, unstable, dangerous. Marcus turned to face the Scarith platform. With respect, Delegate Thesk, the Scarith have fought 14 wars in the last 1,000 years. Humanity has fought 2. If violence disqualifies a species from the Council, these platforms would be empty. Silence. Thesk's eyes narrowed, but he did not respond. High Chancellor Kethvoran spoke again. The human makes a fair point. However, the Scarith have been members of this council for 90,000 years. They have proven their value. Humanity has proven nothing. We hope to change that, Marcus said. We are here to begin proving ourselves. We ask only for the opportunity. The Mordith Collective moved forward on their platform. When they spoke, it was with 5 voices, in perfect unison, creating an eerie harmonic effect. Before any discussion of membership, there is the matter of the Kepler colonies. 3 human settlements exist in space that belongs to the Mordith Collective. This is a violation of territorial law. This must be addressed. Marcus had expected this. The Kepler colonies were established in unclaimed space according to all galactic surveys available to humanity at the time. If there is a dispute, we are willing to discuss it through proper diplomatic channels. There is nothing to discuss, the Mordith said. The space is ours. The colonies will be surrendered to the collective. This is not negotiable. The chamber went quiet. Every delegation watched to see what the human would do. Marcus stood very still. His face showed nothing. When he spoke, his voice was the same quiet tone it had always been. I'm afraid that is not possible. Those colonies are home to over 2 million human beings. They will not be surrendered. They will not be abandoned. If the Mordith Collective has a territorial claim, we invite you to present evidence and negotiate in good faith. But we will not hand over our people. The Mordith made a sound like 1,000 insects clicking their mandibles at once. Then there will be consequences. The Collective does not make requests. The Collective makes demands. You would do well to remember what happens to species that refuse our demands. Marcus looked at the Mordith platform. Something flickered in his eyes, just for an instant. Something very old and very patient. I will remember, he said softly. I remember everything. The session continued for several more hours. Other delegations asked questions. Some were hostile. Some were merely curious. Marcus answered them all with the same calm, quiet voice. By the time the session ended, nothing had been decided. The council would deliberate. They would vote in 3 days. Marcus returned to his quarters. He sat at his desk and looked at the photograph of his daughter. Outside his window, the stars burned cold and distant. He had done what he came to do. He had presented humanity's case. He had shown patience and reason in the face of hostility. He had been exactly what he appeared to be, a quiet diplomat doing his best for his people. But the Mordith had threatened his people. They had spoken of consequences. They had made demands. Marcus Webb had been human for 53 years. Before that, he had been something else. Something that existed before the first stars ignited. Something that had helped seed life across 1,000 galaxies, and then stepped back to watch it grow. He had hoped this mission would go peacefully. He had hoped the council would see reason. He had hoped he would not have to reveal what he truly was. But hope, he had learned over billions of years, was a fragile thing. He would wait. He would give them every chance. And if they forced his hand, He would show them why humanity was special, why they had been placed on that small blue world and guided so carefully toward the stars, why the galaxy should have welcomed them instead of threatening them. Outside the window, a shooting star streaked across the void. Marcus watched it until it disappeared. Then he closed his eyes and waited for what would come. 2 days passed on Concordia Prime. 2 days of waiting and watching and pretending to be patient. Marcus Webb spent most of that time in his quarters, reading reports from Earth and reviewing everything he knew about the Council species. He ate meals in the common dining area, where beings from 100 different worlds gathered to consume nutrients in their various ways. He spoke politely to anyone who approached him, which was not many. The galaxy, it seemed, was content to ignore humanity until the vote. The Mortith Collective was not. On the morning of the 3rd day, Marcus received a formal summons. The Council was calling an emergency session. The Mortith had requested it. They had, according to the message, important matters to discuss regarding the human petition. Marcus dressed carefully. He put on the same simple suit he had worn to the first session. He placed the earth pin on his collar. He looked at himself in the mirror and saw what everyone else saw. A tired, middle-aged man who was very far from home. The guide unit came to escort him. As they walked through the corridors, Marcus noticed that they were busier than usual. Beings of all species were moving toward the great chamber. Word had spread. Something was going to happen. When Marcus entered the chamber, he saw that every platform was occupied. Not just the delegates this time, but advisors, assistants, and observers. The Mortith platform was especially crowded. At least 30 of their kind clustered there, their compound eyes all fixed on the central podium. Marcus walked to his position and waited. High Chancellor Keth Voran called the session to order. His crystalline voice echoed through the vast space. This emergency session has been called at the request of the Mortith Collective. They have indicated that they wish to present new evidence regarding the human territorial dispute. The collective may speak. The 5-being cluster that served as the Mortith ambassador moved forward. Their voices joined in that unsettling harmony. The collective has reviewed the human claim to the Kepler colonies. We have examined their so-called surveys. We have consulted our own records. The conclusion is clear. The humans knew that space belonged to the Mortith. They settled there deliberately, in violation of galactic law. This was not a mistake. It was an invasion. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Marcus remained still. Furthermore, the Mortith continued, we have learned that the human colonies have constructed military installations, weapons, platforms, defense grids. The humans are not settlers. They are conquerors. They have built a fortress in our territory, and they expect us to accept this? The murmurs grew louder. Several delegations were nodding. The Scarith looked pleased. Even the more neutral species seemed concerned. High Chancellor Keth Voran turned his ancient eyes toward Marcus. The human representative may respond to these accusations. Marcus stepped forward slightly. His voice was calm and clear. The Kepler colonies do have defensive systems. This is true. We built them because we have learned, in our short time among the stars, that space is dangerous. We have been attacked before. We will probably be attacked again. Every human colony has some form of defense. This is not aggression. It is survival. Survival. The Mortith made that clicking sound again. Your species has existed for barely a moment. What do you know of survival? The collective has survived for 3 million years. We have outlasted extinction events. We have consumed species that thought themselves powerful. Your defensive systems do not concern us. What concerns us is the insult. You have taken what is ours. You refuse to return it. This cannot stand. What would you have us do? Marcus asked. Abandon 2 million people. Send them into space with nowhere to go. The colonies have been established for 40 years. Generations have been born there. It is their home. Then they should not have built their home in our territory. Marcus took a slow breath. The Mortith have not occupied that space in over 600 years. There were no settlements, no stations, no presence of any kind. Our surveys showed empty space. We settled it in good faith. Good faith? The Mortith's voices rose. You speak of good faith while building weapons on our worlds? You speak of good faith while your species spreads across the galaxy like a disease? The collective has been patient. The collective has been generous. But patience has limits. High Chancellor Keth Voran raised one crystalline limb. The council will consider both perspectives. A vote will be held as scheduled. Is there anything else? The Mordith did not answer immediately. The 5 beings conferred in that silent way hive minds communicate. Then they spoke again, and their voices had changed. There was something harder in them now. Something final. There is one more matter. The collective invokes the right of challenge. The chamber went absolutely silent. Even the ambient hum of the station seemed to fade. Every being present knew what those words meant. High Chancellor Keth Varan's crystal form flickered with colors that indicated distress. The right of challenge has not been invoked in over 4,000 years. It is an ancient protocol. It is meant for extreme circumstances. These are extreme circumstances, the Mordith said. A young species has stolen our territory and refuses to return it. They mock our authority. They insult our heritage. The collective will not let this stand. We invoke the right of challenge. Combat will decide the matter. Thesk of the Scareth stepped forward on his platform. His reptilian face showed what might have been a smile. The Scareth support this invocation. The right of challenge is a valid protocol. It should be honored. Other delegations began speaking. Some in support, some in opposition. But it did not matter. Marcus could see that the decision had already been made. The right of challenge was written into the founding laws of the council. If one party invoked it, and the other did not refuse, combat was required. Ambassador Webb, High Chancellor Keth Varan said, "You may refuse the challenge. If you do, the matter will be decided by council vote. However, refusing a challenge is considered dishonorable. It may affect how the council views your petition." Marcus understood. If he refused, humanity would be seen as weak, cowardly. The vote would almost certainly go against them. If he accepted, he would have to fight. And looking at the Mordith platform, he could see that they had already prepared for this outcome. 6 Mordith warriors stood behind the ambassador cluster. They were larger than the others, bred specifically for combat. Their shells were reinforced with metal plating. Their limbs ended in blades. Their compound eyes were covered with targeting systems. They were weapons given life. "I understand," Marcus said. His voice did not waver. "What are the terms of the challenge?" The Mordith ambassadors' voices took on a tone of satisfaction. "The terms are simple. The collective will send its champions to face the human representative. If the human wins, the territorial dispute is resolved in humanity's favor. If the collective wins, humanity surrenders the Kepler colonies and withdraws its petition for council membership." How many champions? 6. A ripple of reaction went through the chamber. 6 against 1. Even by the standards of the right of challenge, this was excessive. But Marcus noticed that no one objected. The other delegations were content to watch. Some looked concerned. Most looked curious. A few looked eager, anticipating entertainment. High Chancellor Keth Varan spoke carefully. "Ambassador Webb, you may designate a champion to fight on your behalf. Earth's military has representatives on the station. You could summon one of them." Marcus looked at the 6 Mordith warriors. They stood perfectly still, their bladed limbs gleaming in the chamber's light. Each one was over 2 meters tall. Each one had been fighting and killing since before Marcus was born. They were death incarnate. "That won't be necessary," Marcus said. "I will face the challenge myself." The silence that followed was different from before. This was not anticipation. This was confusion. The human diplomat, a small, aging man in a simple suit, was volunteering to fight 6 of the most dangerous warriors the Mordith collective could produce. The Scareth delegate, Thesk, made a sound that was unmistakably laughter. "The human has courage, foolish courage, but courage nonetheless. This should be quick." High Chancellor Keth Varan's colors shifted to patterns that indicated concern. "Ambassador Webb, I must advise you to reconsider. The right of challenge permits lethal force. If you fall, there will be no recovery. Humanity will lose both its representative and its petition." "I understand the stakes," Marcus said. "I accept the challenge." The Mordith ambassador made a gesture that might have been a bow. "Then it is settled. The challenge will take place here, in the Great Chamber, witnessed by all. The combat will begin when both parties are ready." The 6 warriors began moving from their platform toward the central floor. The other delegations pulled back, creating a wide circle around the podium. Marcus stood at the center, watching the warriors approach. They moved with fluid precision, their many limbs working in perfect coordination, Around the edges of the chamber, beings began making wagers. The odds were not in Marcus's favor. They were not even close. Most bets were simply on how long he would survive. Seconds, most predicted. A minute at most. The Verdani delegation, beings of living wood and gentle nature, sent a message to the human. It appeared on a small screen near his position. "We are sorry." The message read, "We did not want this. May your end be quick." Marcus did not respond. The 6 Mordath warriors took their positions around him, forming a circle. Their bladed limbs extended to full length. The metal of their plating clicked and shifted as they prepared for battle. High Chancellor Kethvaran raised his limb. "The challenge will now commence. Fight until yield or death." The limb fell. The first warrior lunged. Its blade swept toward Marcus's throat with speed that should have been impossible for a creature of its size. The attack was perfect. The angle was exact. The blade was sharp enough to cut through starship hull plating. Marcus did not move. The blade stopped a centimeter from his neck. The warrior tried to push forward, but something was holding it back. Something that looked like nothing at all. Just empty air that had suddenly become solid. The warrior made a sound of confusion. It pulled back and struck again. Same result. The blade simply stopped, as if it had hit an invisible wall. The other 5 warriors attacked simultaneously. Blades came from every direction. Each one stopped just before reaching Marcus. Each one found nothing but could go no further. Marcus stood in the center of the storm of blades and did not move. His expression had not changed. His hands remained at his sides. He looked almost bored. "Is this all?" he asked quietly. The Mordath ambassador's 5 bodies moved forward on the platform. "What trick is this? What technology do you hide?" "No technology," Marcus said. "No trick. I am simply not what I appear to be." The warriors pulled back, regrouping. They exchanged information through their hive link, adjusting their tactics. Then they attacked again, this time with more coordination. 2 came high, 2 came low, 2 came from the sides. It was a pattern designed to find gaps in any defense. There were no gaps. Every blade stopped. Every attack failed. Marcus stood untouched at the center. High Chancellor Kethvaran's crystal form was flickering rapidly now. "This is unprecedented. The human appears to have some kind of protective field." "Not a field," Marcus said. His voice carried through the chamber, soft but clear. Something much older. He turned to look at the Mordath ambassador. Something in his eyes had changed. They were still brown, still human. But there was a depth to them now that had not been there before. A depth that seemed to go on forever. "I gave you every chance," Marcus said. "I came here in peace. I spoke with respect. I asked only for a fair hearing. You responded with threats, with demands, with violence." He paused. "That was a mistake." The warriors attacked again. This time, Marcus moved. He did not move like a human. He did not move like anything the assembled beings had ever seen. One moment he was standing still. The next he was somewhere else. Then somewhere else again. The warriors slashed at empty air while Marcus appeared behind them, beside them, above them. He still had not raised his hands. He still had not struck back. He was simply showing them that they could not touch him. The Mordath warriors stopped attacking. They stood in a circle around the space where Marcus had been, their compound eyes searching for him. They found him standing exactly where he had started, at the center of the chamber floor. "Enough games," the Mordath ambassador said. "Whatever technology you possess, it will not save your colonies. It will not save your species. The collective is patient. We will find your weakness." Marcus looked at the ambassador. Then he looked at the council. His gaze moved slowly across the platforms, meeting the eyes of each delegation in turn. The Virethi, the Scareth, the Lumineth, all of them. "You want to know what I am," he said. It was not a question. "You look at me and see a small, weak creature from a young species. You see prey. You see something to dominate and control and consume." He began to walk toward the Mordath warriors. They raised their blades but did not attack. "For 200 years, humanity has traveled among the stars. We have been mocked, threatened, attacked. We have been told we are too young, too weak, too primitive to deserve a place in the galaxy. We have been patient. We have tried to prove ourselves. We have hoped that one day we would be accepted." He stopped in front of the largest warrior. The creature towered over him, its bladed limbs poised to strike. I am tired of being patient, Marcus said. His eyes changed. They did not just change color. They changed nature. The brown irises became windows into something vast and dark and ancient, something that had existed before the first atoms formed, something that had watched the universe take shape and had waited, through billions of years, for this moment. You want to see what I really am? Marcus asked. His voice was no longer one voice. It was thousands of voices, layered on top of each other, speaking in harmonics that made the walls of the chamber vibrate. The lights flickered. The transparent dome overhead showed stars that suddenly seemed very small and very far away. Then look, Marcus Webb began to unfold. His human form did not disappear. It expanded. It grew. It became something that filled the center of the chamber while somehow also staying exactly where it was. Reality bent around him like light bending around a massive star. Dimensions that the assembled beings had never perceived suddenly became visible. And in those dimensions, something was moving. Something impossible. Something older than the galaxy itself. The Mortith warriors did not scream. They did not have time. Their minds simply stopped, overwhelmed by what they were perceiving. They fell to the floor and did not move. On the platforms around the chamber, ancient beings who had lived for millions of years felt something they had not felt since their species was young. Terror, absolute, primal, overwhelming terror, because they recognized what Marcus Webb had become. They had read about it in their oldest texts. They had seen images of it carved into ruins that predated their civilizations. They had told stories about it to frighten their young. A warden had come to the Galactic Council, and it was not pleased. The Great Chamber had seen many things in its long history. It had witnessed the signing of treaties that ended wars lasting millennia. It had hosted debates that shaped the future of entire species. It had survived assassination attempts, terrorist attacks, and one memorable occasion when a delegation of energy beings had accidentally destabilized the station's power core. It had never seen anything like this. Marcus Webb stood at the center of the floor. But he was no longer just Marcus Webb. His human form remained visible. That small figure in the simple suit, with gray hair and tired eyes. But around him and through him and somehow inside him, something else had emerged. Something that defied the understanding of every being present. The Virathi were creatures of crystal. They perceived the universe through light and vibration. What they saw when they looked at Marcus was a shape that existed in wavelengths they had no names for. It was like looking at a color that had never existed before. A color that hurt to perceive because their minds could not process it. The Scarith were predators, creatures of instinct and violence. What they felt when they looked at Marcus was the certain knowledge that they were no longer at the top of any food chain. They felt small, helpless, like prey animals facing something so far beyond them that fighting was not even a concept anymore. The Lumineth were beings of pure energy, ancient and wise. What they understood when they looked at Marcus was that they were children, infants. Their entire species, with its millions of years of history, was nothing but a brief spark compared to what stood before them now. The Mortith Collective, with its hive mind spanning thousands of individual bodies, tried to process what it was seeing. The hive link shattered. Every Mortith in the chamber suddenly became individuals, their shared consciousness broken by exposure to something it could not contain. They collapsed, chittering in confusion and fear. High Chancellor Kethvoran tried to speak. His crystalline form vibrated, attempting to produce sound. But no words came. For the first time in his 200,000 years of life, he had nothing to say. Marcus, or the thing that wore Marcus's form, stood perfectly still at the center of this chaos. The 1,000 voices that spoke through him fell silent for a moment. Then, with what might have been gentleness, he pulled himself back. The impossible dimensions folded inward. The colors that hurt to perceive faded. The presence that had filled the chamber retreated, compressing itself back into the shape of a human diplomat. When he spoke again, it was with one voice. Quiet, calm, almost apologetic. I did not want to do that, he said. I had hoped it would not be necessary. No one responded. No one could. Marcus looked around at the platforms, at the ancient and powerful beings who ruled the galaxy, now silent and shaking. He felt something that might have been sadness. He had lived among so many species. He had watched them grow and evolve and build civilizations. He had loved them, in his way. He had not wanted to frighten them, but they had given him no choice. Let me explain, he said. Let me tell you what I am and why I am here. I owe you that much. He walked slowly across the chamber floor as he spoke. The 6 Mordith warriors still lay where they had fallen, alive but unconscious. Marcus stepped around them carefully. In the beginning, he said, there was nothing. No matter, no energy, no space, no time. Just potential, waiting to become something. Then the universe began. It exploded outward from a single point, creating everything that exists. Stars formed, galaxies took shape, the cosmos filled with light and heat and possibility. He paused, looking up at the transparent dome and the stars beyond. But we were here first. We existed in the nothing, in the potential. When the universe began, we were already ancient. We watched it happen. We felt the first atoms form. We saw the first stars ignite. We witnessed the birth of everything. High Chancellor Kethvoran finally found his voice. It was weak, trembling, nothing like his usual commanding tone. The Wardens. The stories are true. You are the Wardens. That is what your oldest texts call us, Marcus said. We have had many names over the ages. The first ones, the Cedars, the Guardians of the Great Silence. None of them are quite accurate, but none of them are quite wrong either. The creation myths, said one of the Verdani, its voice rustling like wind through leaves. Every species has them. Stories of beings who existed before the beginning, who shaped the universe and seeded life across the stars. We thought they were legends. We thought they were metaphors. Stories often contain truth, Marcus said. Your creation myths remember us because we wanted you to remember. We wanted you to know that you were not alone, that someone had come before, that someone was watching. He turned to face the Mordith platform. The ambassador cluster had collapsed, its 5 bodies now separated and confused. They stared at Marcus with compound eyes that could no longer share a single vision. When the universe was young, Marcus continued, we realized that it was empty, full of matter and energy, but empty of meaning, empty of life, empty of minds that could appreciate the beauty of what existed, so we decided to change that. You created life, Thesk of the Scarith said. His voice was different now. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that might have been awe. We planted seeds, Marcus said. On billions of worlds, across millions of galaxies, we introduced the potential for life. Simple chemicals, basic structures, the building blocks from which everything else would grow. Then we stepped back and watched. We waited to see what would emerge. He smiled. It was a human expression, warm and gentle and somehow sad. The results exceeded our expectations. Life took forms we had never imagined. Intelligence arose in patterns we had never predicted. Species developed cultures, technologies, philosophies. They learned to love and hate and wonder. They looked up at the stars and asked questions we had asked ourselves at the beginning of time. But why? Asked the Lumineth representative, its energy form flickering with uncertainty. Why create life only to abandon it? Why seed the universe and then disappear? We did not abandon you, Marcus said. We watched. We are still watching. But we learned early on that life must be allowed to grow on its own terms. If we had stayed visible, if we had guided you every step of the way, you would never have become truly independent. You would have been pets, children who never grew up. We wanted more for you than that. He walked back to the center of the chamber and stood where the human podium had been. For billions of years, we have observed. We have seen species rise and fall. We have watched civilizations build empires and then crumble to dust. We have witnessed acts of incredible cruelty and incredible kindness. Through it all, we have maintained our distance. We have let you make your own choices, your own mistakes, your own triumphs. Then why reveal yourself now? High Chancellor Kethvoran asked. Why break your silence after all this time? Marcus's expression changed. The sadness deepened. Because of humanity, he said. A murmur went through the chamber. Every eye, every sensor, every form of perception turned toward him with new intensity. Humanity is different, Marcus said. When we seeded Earth 4 billion years ago, we did something we had never done before. We included a fragment of ourselves in the design, a piece of our essence, woven into the genetic code of that small blue world. You are saying, Kethvoran said slowly, that humans are not just another species. They are connected to you. They are our children, Marcus said. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally. Every human who has ever lived carries a piece of what we are within them. Most never know it. Most live entire lives as normal humans, no different from what they appear to be. But the potential is always there, sleeping inside them. Waiting. Waiting for what? Waiting to awaken. Under the right circumstances, with the right trigger, a human can become what I am. Not all of them. Not even many of them. But some. Enough. He looked down at his hands, the human hands that had held documents and photographs and cups of coffee, the hands that had shaken the limbs and tentacles and appendages of 1,000 different species. I was born Marcus Webb 53 years ago in a city called Boston on the continent of North America. I had a mother who loved music and a father who built furniture. I went to school. I fell in love. I had a daughter. For most of my life, I was exactly what I appeared to be. A human. Nothing more. What changed? The Verdani asked. I died, Marcus said simply. 20 years ago, there was an accident. A shuttle crash on Mars. I should not have survived. My body was broken beyond repair. But in that moment, as I lay dying, something inside me woke up. The fragment of warden essence that had been sleeping in my DNA for 50,000 generations finally opened its eyes. He raised his head and looked at the council with those eyes that had seen the birth of stars. I remembered everything. I remembered existing before time began. I remembered seeding life across the cosmos. I remembered watching humanity take its first steps and hoping that one day, they would be ready to join their galactic neighbors. I remembered being Marcus Webb, and I remembered being something far older. Both memories are real. Both identities are true. I am human, and I am warden. I am both. And the other humans? Keth Voran asked. Do they know what they are? Most do not. The awakening is rare. It requires extreme circumstances, usually moments of death or transcendence. Only a few dozen humans in history have awakened. Most chose to keep their nature hidden. They lived out their human lives, experienced human joys and sorrows, and eventually died human deaths. The warden essence returned to the great pattern, waiting to be born again, in another vessel. But you chose differently. I chose to serve. When the United Earth government began looking for someone to represent humanity at this council, I volunteered. I knew the risks. I knew that the galaxy might not welcome us. I knew that violence was possible. I hoped it would not come to that. I hoped I could convince you with words, with patience, with the simple truth of what humanity could become. He turned to look at the Mortith, still scattered and confused across their platform. But you would not listen. You threatened our colonies. You invoked ancient protocols of combat. You sent warriors to kill me in front of the entire council. His voice hardened slightly. You forced me to reveal what I am. That was your choice, not mine. The chamber was silent again. But it was a different kind of silence now. Not the silence of terror, but the silence of beings processing something that changed everything they knew about the universe. High Chancellor Keth Voran finally spoke. If what you say is true, then humanity is not what we thought. They are not a young species struggling to find their place. They are vessels, containers for something ancient and powerful. They are people, Marcus said firmly. Human beings with human lives and human hopes and human fears. The warden essence inside them does not control them. It does not define them. Most will never know it exists. They will live and love and die as humans, and that is exactly as it should be. The essence is a gift, not a burden. A potential, not a destiny. But some will awaken, Thesk said. His predator's mind was working, calculating. Some will become like you. And there are billions of humans. Hundreds of billions. If you count those born throughout your history. Yes, then humanity is not just one species. It is an army of potential wardens. An army that could crush any force in the galaxy. Marcus looked at the Scarith with something like pity. You still do not understand, he said. The wardens do not conquer. We do not crush. We do not build empires or wage wars. We protect. We nurture. We ensure that life continues and grows and evolves. That is what we have always done. That is what we will always do. Then why frighten us? Asked the Lumineth. Why reveal yourself in such a terrifying way? If you mean no harm, why show us something that fills us with such fear? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was gentle. Because you needed to understand. You needed to see what humanity truly is. Not because we want to threaten you, but because we want to protect you from making a terrible mistake. What mistake? Harming us, Marcus said. Harming humans. For 200 years, the galaxy has looked at humanity as weak and primitive and vulnerable. Some species have considered conquering us, destroying us, absorbing us into their empires. The Mortith are not the first to make threats, and they would not have been the last. He let his gaze sweep across every platform, meeting every eye. I am here to deliver a message. A warning. Not a threat of violence, but a simple truth that every species in this galaxy needs to understand. He paused, letting the words build weight. Humanity is protected, not by ships or weapons or treaties. By us. By the wardens who sleep within them. We have watched over them since their first ancestors crawled out of the oceans. We will continue to watch over them until the last star burns out. If anyone harms them, intentionally, and without provocation, we will respond, not with anger, not with vengeance, but with consequences that no species, however ancient, however powerful, can survive. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, slowly, High Chancellor Kethvaran bowed. It was a deep bow, the kind reserved for beings of equal or greater status. One by one, the other delegations followed. Even Thesk of the Scareth, his predator's pride broken, lowered his head. Only the Mortith remained still, scattered and broken, unable to coordinate a response. Marcus Webb looked at the assembled council, the rulers of the galaxy bowing before him, and felt no triumph, only a deep, ancient tiredness. He had hoped it would not come to this, but hope, as he had learned over billions of years, was a fragile thing. The humans have a saying, he said softly. Be careful what you wish for. You wanted to see what humanity really is. Now you know. He straightened his tie, a perfectly human gesture, and walked back to the podium. Now, he said, shall we continue discussing the petition? The great chamber remained frozen, in a moment that felt like it would last forever. The ancient rulers of the galaxy stayed bowed before Marcus Webb, afraid to move, afraid to speak, afraid to do anything that might draw the attention of the impossible being that wore a human face. Marcus let them stay that way for exactly 3 heartbeats. Then he raised one hand in a gesture of peace. Please, he said, and his voice was just a voice again, quiet and human and kind. There is no need for this. I am not your enemy. I have never been your enemy. Rise. Let us speak as equals. Slowly, hesitantly, the delegation straightened. High Chancellor Kethvaran was the first to fully stand, his crystalline form still flickering with colors that indicated deep disturbance. He looked at Marcus with eyes that had seen millions of years pass but had never seen anything like this. You speak of equality, Kethvaran said, his voice carefully controlled. But how can there be equality between us and what you are? You existed before our ancestors were dust. You have power beyond anything we can imagine. We are nothing compared to you. Marcus shook his head. That is not true. You are everything we hoped you would become. Every species in this room, every civilization represented on these platforms, is a miracle. You evolved from simple chemicals into thinking, feeling beings. You built societies and technologies and art. You asked questions about the universe and searched for answers. That is not nothing. That is everything. But you created us, said the Verdani representative. We are your creations, your experiments. How can experiments be equal to their creators? Because creation is not ownership, Marcus said. When we seeded life across the cosmos, we did not claim possession of what grew. We gave you the potential for existence. What you did with that potential was entirely your own choice. Your cultures are yours. Your achievements are yours. Your failures are yours. We did not make you who you are. You made yourselves. He walked slowly around the chamber floor, passing by each platform in turn, speaking to each delegation directly. The Virathi developed a form of consciousness based on light and vibration. We never imagined such a thing was possible. The Scareth evolved from apex predators and learned to channel their aggression into competitive systems that actually reduce violence. The Lumineth transcended physical form entirely and became beings of pure thought. Each of you found solutions to the problems of existence that we could not have predicted. He stopped in front of the Mortith platform. The five-being cluster that had served as their ambassador was still scattered, still struggling to reconnect their hive mind. Individual Mortith made clicking sounds of distress, lost without their collective consciousness. Even the Mortith, Marcus said gently. Your hive mind structure is a remarkable adaptation, individual beings choosing to share a single consciousness, gaining the benefits of collective thought while sacrificing individual perspective. We watched your species develop this ability over millions of years. It was beautiful to observe. One of the scattered Mortith managed to speak. Its voice was strange, singular, nothing like the harmonized tones of the collective. We tried to kill you. We threatened your children. Why do you not destroy us? Marcus knelt down so that he was at eye level with the fallen creature. Because destruction is never the answer. You made a mistake. You acted out of fear and greed and the instinct to dominate. These are common failures among young species. We do not punish species for being young. Then what will happen to us? The Mortith asked. What consequences do we face? Marcus stood back up and turned to address the entire council. That is for you to decide. The Galactic Council exists to resolve disputes between species. The Mortith made threats and invoked violence. It is the Council's role to determine what, if anything, should be done in response. High Chancellor Kethvoran stirred. Some of his usual authority was returning to his voice. You would leave the judgment to us? You have the power to do anything you want. You could eliminate the Mortith entirely. You could reshape this council however you see fit. Why would you defer to our decision? Because that is how civilizations grow, Marcus said. You must make your own choices and live with the consequences. If I solved every problem, made every decision, prevented every conflict, you would never learn. You would remain dependent on external guidance forever. That is not what we want for you. He returned to the central podium and stood there, his hands clasped in front of him, looking for all the world like any other diplomat at any other summit. I will tell you what we do want, he said. We want you to thrive. We want you to grow and change and become something even greater than you are now. We want you to explore the universe and discover its wonders and understand its mysteries. We want you to make mistakes and learn from them, to fight and make peace, to struggle and overcome. And humanity? Thesk of the Scarith asked. What do you want for them? The same thing. Humanity is young. They have much to learn and far to go. They will make mistakes, probably many of them. They will need guidance and friendship and patience from their galactic neighbors. Marcus paused. That is what I came here to ask for. Not special treatment. Not fear. Just a fair chance to prove themselves. The Lumineth representative pulsed with soft light. And if we refuse? If we still choose to reject humanity's petition? Will there be consequences then? No, Marcus said firmly. If you reject the petition through legitimate deliberation, we will accept that decision. Humanity will return to its colonies and continue growing on its own. We will not force ourselves upon you. We only ask that you make your decision based on reason and fairness, not on fear or prejudice. But you showed us your true form, Kethvoran said. You revealed your power. You demonstrated that humanity is connected to beings older than the universe itself. How can we ignore that? How can we pretend that humanity is just another species seeking membership? Marcus smiled. It was a tired smile, but genuine. You cannot ignore it, he admitted. And I would not ask you to. What I ask is that you consider it in its full context. Yes, humanity carries warden essence. Yes, some humans may one day awaken to powers beyond your imagination, but those humans will still be humans. They will still love their families, cherish their cultures, fear death, and hope for the future. The essence does not make them gods. It makes them more connected to the universe, more aware of the patterns that shape existence, more responsible for the welfare of all living things. He looked around the chamber at the faces watching him. Crystalline, reptilian, insectoid, plant-like, energy-based, mechanical, so many different forms of life, so many different ways of being alive. The wardens have a name for what humanity represents, he said. We call them the seedlings, not because they are small or weak, but because they are the culmination of everything we hope to achieve. When we planted life across the cosmos, we dreamed that one day, some species would become not just alive but truly aware of the cosmic scale of existence, aware of their connection to all other living things, aware of their responsibility to nurture and protect life wherever it exists. And humanity has achieved this awareness? The Verdani asked. Not yet. Not fully. They are still learning, still growing, still discovering who they truly are. But the potential is there, in every single human being. The potential to become stewards of life itself. To become what we have always been, but in their own unique way. Marcus fell silent. The chamber was quiet. Every being lost in thoughts that would have been unimaginable just hours before. Finally, High Chancellor Kethvoran spoke. His voice was measured, thoughtful, showing the wisdom of his immense age. The council will need time to deliberate. What you have revealed changes everything we thought we knew about the universe. We cannot simply vote as if this were an ordinary petition. Of course, Marcus said. Take whatever time you need. However, Kethvoran continued, there is still the matter of the Mordith challenge. The right of challenge was invoked. Combat occurred. According to protocol, there must be a resolution. Everyone looked at the Mordith platform, where the scattered members of the collective were still struggling to reconnect. Without their hive mind, they seemed confused and lost, like children separated from their parents. Marcus considered for a moment. The warriors sent against me are alive. They will recover. I suggest we consider the challenge concluded without a victor, given the unusual circumstances. That is generous, Kethvoran said. Perhaps too generous. The Mordith threatened genocide against human colonies. They attempted to kill a diplomatic representative in front of the entire council. These are not minor offenses. No, they are not, Marcus agreed. But the Mordith are currently in a state of severe distress. Their hive mind has been disrupted. Passing judgment on them now would be like putting a sick child on trial for throwing a tantrum. Let them recover first. Let them understand what they have done. Then let them face the consequences with full awareness. Thesk of the Scareth made a sound that might have been respect. You show mercy to those who tried to destroy you. That is not the way of predators. No, Marcus said. It is the way of guardians. We protect life, even life that has tried to harm us, especially life that has tried to harm us. Destruction is easy. Preservation is hard. We choose the harder path. The session continued for several more hours. Questions were asked and answered. Details were discussed. Plans were made for the Mordith to receive medical attention and psychological support as they worked to restore their collective consciousness. The territorial dispute over the Kepler colonies was set aside indefinitely. Through it all, Marcus remained calm and patient, answering every question with the same quiet honesty. He spoke of the Warden's history, though he admitted there was much he could not explain because mortal minds could not comprehend it. He spoke of humanity's future, though he acknowledged that future was not yet written. He spoke of the galaxy's potential, the possibility of all species working together to create something greater than any of them could achieve alone. When the session finally ended, the delegations filed out of the chamber in silence. There were no arguments, no political maneuvering, no attempts to gain advantage. Every being present had been changed by what they had witnessed. They needed time to process, to think, to decide what this new reality meant for their species and their future. Marcus was the last to leave. He stood at the central podium for a long moment, looking up at the stars visible through the transparent dome. So many stars, so many worlds, so much life, scattered across the vastness of space. He had lived for billions of years in various forms, but he had never stopped being amazed by the universe, its beauty, its complexity, its endless capacity for surprise. Was this the right choice? He asked quietly, speaking to no one and everyone. Revealing ourselves after so long in hiding, no answer came from the stars. Perhaps there would never be an answer. Perhaps some questions were meant to remain open forever. Marcus straightened his tie, a habit he had developed in his 53 years as a human being. Then he walked out of the great chamber and returned to his quarters. The photograph of his daughter was still on the desk where he had left it. Sarah, 26 years old, a doctor on Mars colony. She had her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn streak. She had no idea what her father truly was. She remembered him as the man who had nearly died in a shuttle crash 20 years ago, who had somehow survived against all odds, who had come home changed in ways she could not define. She loved him. He loved her. That love was real, regardless of what else might be true about him. Marcus picked up the photograph and looked at his daughter's face. I did this for you, he said softly. For you and everyone like you. So that you can grow up in a galaxy that does not fear humanity. So that you can reach your full potential without being destroyed by those who do not understand. He set the photograph down and walked to the window. Outside, the stars burned cold and eternal. Tomorrow, the council would begin its deliberations. In time, they would make their decision. Whatever that decision was, Marcus would accept it. He had done what he came to do. He had shown the galaxy what humanity truly was, and what it could become. The rest was up to them. He stood at the window for a long time, watching the stars, thinking thoughts that spanned billions of years. When he finally turned away, his eyes were brown again, fully human, with no hint of the cosmic depths that lay beneath. Marcus Webb, human diplomat, went to bed. The warden who wore his face continued to watch over him, and through him, over all of humanity. It had been doing so since the first humans looked up at the night sky and wondered what lay beyond. It would continue doing so until the last star burned out. This was what it meant to be a guardian. Not power, not control. Just an endless, patient, loving watch over those who could not protect themselves. The galaxy was full of dangers. Humanity was full of potential. The wardens would ensure that the dangers never overwhelmed the potential. That was the promise they had made when they first seeded life across the cosmos. That was the promise they would keep forever. The council deliberated for 7 days. During that time, Marcus Webb stayed in his quarters, reading books from Earth and watching the stars through his window. He did not attend any of the closed sessions. He did not try to influence the outcome. He had said what needed to be said. The rest was not his decision to make. On the 8th day, Administrator Velith came to his door. The tall Calith's face showed something that might have been nervousness, though her species was known for emotional control. Ambassador Webb, she said, the council has reached a decision. They request your presence in the Great Chamber. Marcus nodded. He put on his suit, straightened his tie, and placed the earth pin on his collar. The same routine he had followed before the first session. The same simple gestures of a human preparing for an important moment. Lead the way, he said. The corridors were strangely empty as they walked. Marcus noticed that beings who had previously ignored him now stepped aside, pressing themselves against walls or ducking into side passages. They watched him pass with eyes that held fear, respect, and something else. Something that looked almost like hope. Word had spread. The entire station knew what had happened in the Great Chamber. The entire station knew what Marcus Webb really was. Some had refused to believe it at first, dismissing the stories as exaggeration or propaganda. Then the recordings had been leaked. Every being with access to the station's information network had watched Marcus unfold into something impossible, had watched the ancient rulers of the galaxy bow before him, had heard his words about humanity and the wardens and the true nature of existence. Nothing would ever be the same. The Great Chamber was full when Marcus arrived. Every platform was occupied, not just by delegates but by observers from dozens of species. The dome overhead showed a clear view of the stars, and the light from distant suns filled the room with a soft glow. Marcus walked to the central podium and waited. High Chancellor Keth Voran stood at the front of the Virathi platform. His crystalline form had stabilized since the events of 8 days ago, though there were new patterns in his structure that had not been there before. Patterns of change, patterns of growth. Ambassador Webb, Keth Voran said. His voice echoed through the chamber with the weight of 2 million years of history. The Galactic Council has reached a decision regarding Earth's petition for membership. Marcus inclined his head slightly but said nothing. Before I announce the decision, Keth Voran continued, I want to acknowledge that these deliberations were unlike any in the Council's history. We have debated not just the merits of a single species, but the nature of existence itself. We have questioned everything we thought we knew about the universe, and our place in it. We have argued, disagreed, and struggled to find common ground. He paused, letting his words settle into the silence. In the end, we reached a unanimous decision. Not because of fear, though fear was certainly present. Not because of threats, though the implications of your revelation were clear to all. We reached this decision because, after 7 days of discussion, we came to understand something important. Marcus waited. Humanity is not just another species seeking membership in the Galactic Council. Humanity represents something larger, something that connects all of us, every species in this room, to the origins of life itself. When you told us that the Wardens seeded life across the cosmos, You were telling us that we are all family, distant family, separated by billions of years and countless evolutionary paths, but family, nonetheless. Around the chamber, delegates nodded. Even Thesk of the Scareth, whose species had never been known for sentimentality, made a gesture of agreement. The Council has voted to grant humanity full membership, Kethvorin announced. You will have a platform in this chamber, equal to any other species. You will have a voice in our deliberations, and we will have a voice in yours. You will be bound by our laws, and we will be bound by our commitment to your welfare. Marcus felt something shift inside him. Not the warden essence, which remained calm and patient as always. Something more human. Relief. Gratitude. The simple joy of achieving something that had seemed impossible. Thank you, he said. On behalf of Earth and all its colonies, I accept this membership with humility and hope. There is more, Kethvorin said. The Council has also decided to establish a new protocol. We call it the Seedling Compact. It is an agreement among all member species to protect and nurture any species that carries warden essence, wherever they may be found. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You expect to find others? Other species like humanity? We do not know. But if the wardens seeded life across billions of worlds, it seems possible that humanity is not the only species to carry their essence. If others exist, we want to ensure they are treated with the same respect and protection that we now extend to humans. It was a remarkable decision, a complete reversal of the attitudes that had dominated the galaxy for millions of years. Instead of seeing warden-connected species as threats to be contained, the Council was committing to see them as precious gifts to be protected. The wardens would be pleased by this, Marcus said. It is exactly the kind of growth we hope to see. There is one final matter, Kethvorin said. The Mordith Collective. Marcus turned to look at the Mordith platform. The 5-being ambassador cluster had been restored, though their movements were slower and more careful than before. The trauma of having their hive mind shattered had left scars that would take generations to fully heal. The collective has requested the opportunity to speak, Kethvorin said. They wish to address Ambassador Webb directly. Marcus nodded. I will hear them. The Mordith ambassador moved forward. When they spoke, their voices were still harmonized, but there was a different quality to them now. Less aggressive, more thoughtful. We have spent 7 days in a state we had never experienced before, the Mordith said. Separated, individual, alone. It was terrifying. We did not know who we were without each other. We did not know how to think without the collective to guide us. They paused, their compound eyes fixed on Marcus, but it was also illuminating. For the first time in our species' history, we understood what it means to be singular, to have thoughts that belong only to you, to face existence alone. We understood finally why other species value individuality so highly, why they resist being absorbed into larger wholes. That was not my intention, Marcus said. I did not mean to cause such suffering. We know. You could have destroyed us. You could have erased us from existence. Instead, you gave us something we had never had before. Perspective. The Mordith made a gesture that Marcus did not recognize. Then they spoke again, and their voices held something that sounded almost like wonder. We withdraw all claims to the Kepler colonies. We renounce our threats against humanity. We offer formal apology for our actions and pledge to support humanity's membership in the Council. But more than that, we wish to understand. Understand what? Everything. The wardens, the seedlings, the true nature of existence. We have spent 3 million years believing that expansion and consumption were the only path to survival. Now we see that there are other paths. Paths we never considered. Paths that lead to connection rather than conquest. Marcus studied the Mordith for a long moment. His human eyes saw beings who had tried to kill him. His warden awareness saw something deeper. A species at a crossroads. A civilization that had just discovered that everything it believed was wrong. The pain of that discovery. The potential for transformation. Understanding takes time, Marcus said. It cannot be rushed. But if you truly wish to learn, I will help you. The wardens have always hoped that all species would eventually grow beyond violence and fear. If the Mordith are ready to take that step, we will walk beside you. The Mordith bowed. All 5 bodies, perfectly synchronized, lowering themselves before the human who was more than human. Thank you, they said. We will not forget this mercy. The ceremony continued for another hour. Documents were signed. Protocols were established. The practical details of humanity's membership were worked out in the careful, methodical way that galactic bureaucracy required. Through it all, Marcus remained at the central podium, playing his role as ambassador with patient professionalism. When it was finally over, he walked out of the great chamber as a representative of a species that now had a voice in galactic affairs. Beings who had ignored him before now stopped to acknowledge him. Some bowed, some simply nodded with respect. A few reached out to touch him, as if contact with his physical form might grant them some blessing. Marcus accepted it all with quiet grace. He understood what was happening. The galaxy was adjusting to a new reality. It would take time for that adjustment to complete. 3 days later, he boarded a shuttle back to Earth. The journey took 2 weeks, even with faster-than-light travel. Marcus spent most of it alone in his cabin, thinking about what had happened and what would come next. He wrote reports for the United Earth government, explaining what had been accomplished and what challenges lay ahead. He recorded messages for the other awakened wardens living among humanity, letting them know that their long vigil had reached a turning point, and he thought about his daughter. Sarah had sent several messages while he was gone. She was worried about him. The news of what had happened on Concordia Prime had reached Earth within days, and she had watched the recordings like everyone else. She had seen her father transform into something impossible. She had heard him speak with the voices of beings older than time. She had questions. So many questions. Marcus did not know how to answer them. He had been her father for 26 years. He had changed her diapers, taught her to ride a bicycle, held her when she cried over her first broken heart. He had been there when she graduated from medical school, when she took her first posting on Mars, when she told him she was proud to be his daughter. All of that was real. All of that was true. But it was not the whole truth. The shuttle landed in Geneva, at the United Earth government's central complex. Marcus was met by a delegation of officials who treated him with a mixture of awe and nervousness. They had questions too. Everyone had questions. He spent a week in briefings and meetings, explaining everything he could explain, deflecting questions he could not answer. He was patient and thorough, just as he had been on Concordia Prime. He did his duty. Then he went home. Home was a small house in the countryside outside Boston, not far from where he had grown up. He had bought it after his awakening, needing a place where he could be alone with his thoughts. It had a garden that he tended himself, growing vegetables and flowers with the same patient care he brought to everything. Sarah was waiting for him when he arrived. She stood in the garden, surrounded by tomato plants and roses, her arms crossed over her chest. She had taken emergency leave from Mars to come here. She had needed to see him in person. "Dad," she said. "Sarah." They looked at each other across the garden. Father and daughter, human and something more. Two people who loved each other, trying to figure out what that love meant now. "I saw the recordings," Sarah said. "I saw you change. I know. Are you still my father? Are you still Marcus Webb?" And Marcus walked through the garden until he was standing in front of her. He took her hands in his, the same hands that had held her when she was small, that had bandaged her scraped knees and wiped away her tears. "I am still Marcus Webb," he said. "I am still your father. I still remember everything we have shared. Every moment, every laugh, every argument. That has not changed. That will never change. But you're also something else. Something I can't even comprehend. Yes, I am also something else. But the something else does not replace who I am. It adds to it. I am more than I was before my awakening. But I am not less." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what to think. I don't know how to feel. You're my dad. You taught me to throw a baseball. You embarrassed me at my high school graduation. But you're older than the universe. How am I supposed to process that?" Marcus pulled her into a hug. She resisted for a moment, then collapsed against him, sobbing. "You don't have to process it all at once," he said gently. "Take your time. Ask me anything you want. I will answer as honestly as I can. But know this. No matter what I am, no matter what I was before, or what I will become, you are my daughter. I love you. That love is the most real thing in my existence." They stood there for a long time, father and daughter, holding each other in a garden under the Earth's blue sky. The galaxy had changed. The universe had revealed its secrets. Ancient powers had stepped out of the shadows and announced their presence. But some things remained the same. The love between parent and child. The bonds that connected families across generations. The simple human need to be known and accepted and cherished. These were the things that mattered. These were the things that made existence worthwhile. Marcus had learned this over billions of years and countless lives. It was the truth at the heart of everything the Wardens had done. Life was precious not because of power or longevity or cosmic significance. Life was precious because of love. That night, Marcus sat in his garden under the stars. Sarah had gone inside to sleep, exhausted from emotion. The house was quiet. The world was quiet. Marcus looked up at the sky and saw what no human eye could see. The patterns of energy that connected all living things. The currents of existence that flowed through the universe. The vast, intricate web of life that the Wardens had spent billions of years nurturing. It was beautiful. It would always be beautiful. He smiled. And for a moment, his eyes held the light of ancient stars. Then he was just Marcus Webb again, a retired diplomat with a garden and a daughter he loved. The universe kept turning. The stars kept burning. Life kept growing, spreading, evolving, becoming more than it had been before. And somewhere out there, across the vastness of space, other Wardens watched.